Today I'd like to talk about a group that I have been associated with for over a year now. The group is called BLARG, which stands for the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group. The group was founded after the death of George Floyd by residents from North Bellport. and the concept in the group's founding was that there is something wrong here in terms of a society where someone like a George Floyd can be killed by a police person. Uh, there's something unjust about this. There's something unfair. We have to take a look at some of the issues that are involved that could perhaps lead to this type of action. The action is kind of symbolic of other things in our society that we have to address. The other concept that it was related to was the idea of our native peoples and their lands, and how the lands that we are living on now really are native lands that indigenous people lived on, and that they were forced off of those lands in really an unjust way. And so we have to deal with that issue as well. We have to have respect for the land, but respect for those people who were the original people who settled this land. And so those two issues sort of came together, the idea of racial justice and the idea of justice for our native peoples, very important. And so the presenting issue was the landfill itself, which is located in North Bellport. Some of the issues dealing with the landfill are the odor that comes forth from the landfill and how that pollutes the air in the surrounding communities. I was over to the landfill and witnessed that in person myself, driving around the area of the landfill. There is a perceptible odor that you pick up. It's more sometimes on windier days. The day I was there was not particularly windy, and I smelt the odor. It was very obvious as you were proximate to the landfill. Another issue is water pollution, because the liner of one of the cells in the landfill was leaking, and water leachate from the landfill got into the underground water and has created a plume. And that has become a real issue. And of course, the soil pollution that results therefrom, and that plume affected wells in the surrounding area. So many of the people in that surrounding area would turn on their faucet, and literally the water would be brown, it would be discolored, there would be an odor from the water, and so they would have to then hook up to other water systems, deal with bottled water. This is an awful issue, obviously, to deal with when you don't have pure water. And so the health effects of this were felt by many in the surrounding area. And the statistic that is the glaring statistic that when you look at this situation is the life expectancy of residents in North Bellport is the lowest life expectancy of any community on Long Island. So you look at that statistic and you say, there's something really wrong here. There's something that has to be addressed. Also, the elementary school close to the landfill as a lawsuit with regard to higher rates of cancer from faculty members and students at that school. So, and again, making the linkage between the illness and the landfill is of course difficult because of there are so many factors. But the idea that these people who work at the school and students from the school getting higher rates of cancer is something that is alarming. And so they want to certainly pursue that in a court of law. The issue that's really raised here, and it's a very significant issue, is one of what we call environmental justice. Why is it that landfills and power plants are located in minority areas. The explanation sometimes given is the land values are lower in those areas, so it's very cost efficient to place landfills, to place waste transfer stations, to place power plants in those areas. But what happens, of course, is that the health effects from those placements are very difficult, and they're borne disproportionately by people who are minorities in our society. And this is obviously a question of justice. Why is this happening? What can be done to prevent this? And how can this be repaired? How can we make this up to people who live in those communities? This becomes a real issue of justice that we have to pursue. And certainly, recent legislation, the climate program that the state has enacted, is trying to deal with this. And they talk about the disadvantaged communities and directing a larger percentage of resources into those areas to help with these negative health effects and problems associated with the placement of landfills and power stations, waste transfer stations in those communities. What are some solutions that people in the BLARG group are looking at? And BLARG is a group from the community and the surrounding area and those on Long Island who are interested in these issues of environmental justice can join. The group meets every Friday, and it is possible certainly to get involved with the group. They have a Facebook page, and they promote various initiatives to bring attention to this issue and to seek redress for this issue. And some of the solutions they're looking at, some of the solutions important to explore, are zero waste, waste reduction, creating less waste, trimming that down, trimming it back. And some people even saying that it is possible, if people are conscientious and people become more aware, to really eliminate the waste by taking proper actions. Also, in terms of one of the big issues has been plastics and the use of these, one-time use plastics. The idea of creating some sort of producer responsibility so that the companies who manufacture the plastics and who use the plastics would be responsible in some way for the recycling of those plastics. What is now is a very small percentage of plastics are actually recycled, unfortunately. And so it's creating a terrible plastics problem for our oceans, for our lands. And what happens is those plastics then get into our soils, get into our oceans. Fish consume little particles. We then consume them, and this, what is creating, of course, is a terrible cycle of harm, harm to the soil, harm to the animals, and harm to ultimately to humans. So this waste problem becomes a real serious issue in terms of the harm that it is doing. The town has proposed a waste transfer station, which again they're locating in this same area. And Blogger said, why put it in that area? An area that has already been harmed, why harm them more? The Covanta system, where they take the garbage and it is incinerated, and then the ash from the garbage goes back to the landfill. A lot of problems with that in terms of the pollution from the incineration that is caused, the air pollution that's caused, but also the improper mixing of the ash that can lead to creating many more toxins. So, and there was a lawsuit by a whistleblower with regard to that the ash was not being properly mixed in a conscientious way. For this waste transfer station, tree clearing has already been done, and in one of the areas of the that has been cleared, there is a plume, and the plume has carcinogenic material. And again, this would be proximate to the landfill. So again, in the same area where there is a concern with regard to environmental justice. There is an anaerobic digester that has been proposed that would help with some of the waste material, would turn that into energy. The proposal by the town that has not certainly been approved yet, but has been discussed, is taking the waste by rail, and instead of the pollution that would come from the trucks carting it off the island. We put it in railroad cars and transfer it that way. And the idea is it's taking trucks off the road, creating less pollution. But again, the problem of this waste going in through the city and where the waste is winding up. And if this is sent to another area, again, we are just exporting our problems to another area. And many of these other areas where this waste is going already are environmental justice areas as well. So we can see as we look at BLARG and their efforts here, very important in terms of dealing with these significant issues of environmental justice and waste. So I'd encourage you to investigate what BLARG has been doing, to participate so that we get a just solution to this extremely important problem. And it is a pressing problem because the landfill is scheduled to close in just a matter of 2 years in 2024. So it's something that we must address very promptly and with a good solid solution that makes sure that there's no harm done to people, to our environment, that we have a respect for our environment.